Cases are one of the most profitable inventions in modern game design history, bringing in more than $1 billion in revenue for Valve annually. With approximately 400 staff, Valve makes more revenue per employee than Google, Microsoft, and Amazon put together. This success, at the hands of what looks a lot like gambling, hasn't gone unnoticed, and Valve has awoken a sleeping giant. The European Union, which accounts for more than 20% of CS2's player base, is setting its sights on loot boxes. While no legal text has formally been written yet, a draft version of the Digital Fairness Act is expected in late 2026. Considering this legal pressure, will terminals be able to replace weapon cases? To answer this question, we'll use real data to understand 4 things. Firstly, we'll look at the past experiments that Valve has tried previously and why they failed. Then, we'll look at the relevant criteria that a weapon case replacement needs to meet. Thirdly, we'll assess terminals against these criteria and see how they stack up. Finally, we'll make some predictions about the future and what it might mean for investors moving forward. Terminals allow players to purchase skins directly from Valve for a fixed price. Interestingly though, it doesn't yet include a special item set. Lootbox legislation pressure has been ramping up for some time now. In response, Valve has constantly iterated CS2's monetization tactics to skirt the ever-increasing legal pressure. I want to take you through some of the legal developments across the world and also some of the updates that Valve has pushed to CS2 to experiment with moving away from loot boxes. Our timeline starts in 2017 with China mandating the disclosure of loot box odds, which Valve promptly complied with. In 2018, Belgium, alongside the Netherlands, declared loot boxes gambling, and Valve removed them from the store. In 2019, Valve introduced the P250 X-Ray, which allowed players in France to continue to open cases despite a ban. In 2020, the UK launched a call for evidence for loot box regulation. 2021 marked Valve's first true attempt at moving away from loot boxes and allowed direct redemptions for the 2021 train collection as part of the Operation Store. In 2022, the UK decided not to regulate loot boxes. In 2023, South Korea followed China and mandated the disclosure of loot box odds. China banned loot boxes for minors, although later seemingly reverted this, and the European Union called for harmonized EU loot box rules across all member countries. 2024 saw the introduction of case rentals, with the kilowatt case being added first. In 2025, we saw Valve's first major step away from loot boxes with the introduction of the Genesis terminal and the later knife trade-up update, allowing coverts to be traded up to special items. For more details on this trade-up update, feel free to click my video linked above. The Genesis terminal is looking promising, but early data suggests it's falling short in some key ways. Let's look at the replacement criteria for weapon cases that the terminal needs to meet in order to be an effective replacement. First, it needs to distribute skins equivalent or better than weapon cases. Secondly, it needs to engage players in the same way that loot boxes do. And third, it needs to generate at least the same amount, if not more revenue for Valve. The way skins are distributed as a result of the chance-based aspect of weapon cases is one of the most fundamental aspects of the system. Skins are desirable because they're rare across a number of dimensions: their rarity tier, their pattern ID, their stat track status, etc. This creates a small number of highly desirable skins that can command a huge price premium. The existence of expensive chase skins makes unboxing for profit a key motivator of CS2 players. Secondly, weapon cases are dropped to players in their weekly drop. This not only encourages them to play the game to get a risk-free profit, but also encourages players to open cases which are then presented in their inventory. When that case hits your inventory, the opportunity to profit is just a click away. Lastly, if Valve will make less money from a weapon case replacement, Valve will not consider it. Like every other business, Valve exists to make a profit, and unless it's forced to legally, it will not replace cases with a less profitable alternative. Let's now assess the success of weapon cases and subsequent replacement attempts across these three dimensions. As discussed, weapon cases distribute skins using chance, creating highly desirable, rare skins. Cases are dropped with a weekly drop, which encourages players to play the game and also encourages players to unbox cases deposited in their inventory. Cases alone are estimated to pull in at least $1 billion in annual revenues for Valve. Any replacement would need to come close to this figure. Starting with the 2021 Train Collection and direct redemptions, we can see that the system fell short in a couple of key areas. Firstly, players significantly over-redeemed the more rare skins, like coverts, and significantly under-redeemed the lower rarity tiers, like mil-specs. With the lack of a true chase item, the prices of Glock 18 Gamma Dopplers and the M4A4 Coalition were pushed down. Revenue under this system was probably good, but not great. The 2021 Train Collection had similar redemption figures to the other collections as part of Operation Riptide, but the system wouldn't generalize to a case replacement. Case rentals were even worse. While skin distribution is not relevant to case rentals, given that skins are removed, they resulted in significantly lower engagement as players largely refused to rent skins, instead choosing to unbox the cases. Rentals likely contribute a very insignificant amount of revenue, as by all accounts the community does not like renting skins. Now that we understand these criteria, let's deep dive into the Genesis terminal to see if it's working or if it's doomed to fail. Let's start by discussing skin distribution and how it differs to cases. Given Valve has publicly released the drop rates for cases, we can assess how well terminals match this distribution. If we look at the proportion of all skins that fall into each rarity for both weapon cases and terminals, we can observe some pretty significant differences. The dark blue bar represents the distribution of skins redeemed from Genesis terminals, while the light blue bar represents the expected distribution based on chance from weapon cases. If we zoom into the covert rarity specifically, we can observe that covert skins are redeemed at a rate over 10 times higher than cases. And looking across all the other rarities, it's clear that terminals will not be an effective replacement when it comes to distributing skins across the rarity stack. But that's not the whole story. Valve uses dynamic prices to influence purchase decisions for players redeeming skins from the terminals. It can easily raise or lower prices of skins in order to encourage or discourage redemptions. When we look at the float distribution of skins purchased from terminals, the story is much better. Here, the dark blue bars represent the wear level distribution of skins redeemed from Genesis terminals, and the light blue bars represent the expected distribution based on chance from case drops. Factory new skins and minimal wear skins are purchased more than we would expect, which makes sense. Field tested is almost perfectly the same, which is actually a surprise, but a pleasant one, and well-worn and battle-scarred are purchased less than we would expect, which again makes sense. Lastly, terminals need to balance the number of skins within each rarity. Take the kilowatt case for example. We would expect the same number of AK inheritances as there are AWP chrome cannons if this distribution is to match that of weapon cases. If we look across the CS Float database, we notice that there are very approximately the same number of both of these skins in existence. Comparing this to Genesis terminals, we can look at the number of each skin that exists within each rarity. For each rarity, we would expect the bar heights to be the same. And again, Valve has developed a fairly robust system here. The bar heights are actually surprisingly similar, with the one exception being the fourth skin in the restricted rarity tier. If you haven't guessed already, that skin is actually the M4A1S Liquidation. The Genesis terminal compares quite favorably to weapon cases across the skin distribution criteria, with the one exception being the rarities of skins that are redeemed. Now, let's turn to player engagement, to understand how the Genesis terminal compares to weapon cases here.
One of the best ways that we can assess how well the community is demanding terminals compared to cases is to look at the price and sales volume on the Steam community market.
Starting with price, if we compare the price of the Genesis terminal to the most recent case additions to CS2, the Genesis terminal has held up surprisingly well, with the price being above the Dreams and Nightmares case, although below the other cases in this list. There's clearly player demand for the Genesis terminal, despite the protests of the player base online. If we switch to unit sales volume from the Steam community market, the story is fairly similar. Again, the Genesis terminal has held up surprisingly well, though it does fall behind the other cases on this list.
One of the confounding factors of the previous analysis is that different cases have different skins that might be more or less desirable, regardless of the form of the case or terminal that they're from.
If we take the median sales price and sales volume of skins within the Genesis terminal and compare it to the Kilowatt collection, there is actually a pretty large difference. The median price of Genesis collection skins is 17% lower than the Kilowatt collection skins median. And the median sales volume is a whopping 86% lower than that of the Kilowatt collection.
There are 4 possible reasons for this. Firstly, given how new the terminal is, players might want to see where prices settle before they start to purchase these skins. Secondly, players might enjoy the terminal itself, but just not the skins within it. Third, there might be a mix effect with higher rarity tiers being more frequently redeemed with the Genesis terminal, but these skins typically also have lower sales volumes. Fourth, players might enjoy redeeming skins directly from the terminal in order to benefit from the original owner certificate, which is only available if you unbox the skin yourself.
To nuance this analysis a little bit, we can recreate the previous chart, but instead breaking down both price and volume into their constituent rarities. Here, the results are a little more interesting. For all rarities except mil-spec, prices are about half that of the Kilowatt case. The mil-spec skins likely have a higher median price as they are redeemed far less frequently, which lowers supply and naturally pushes prices up. For sales volume, the previous redemption rates by rarity analysis is supported by sales volume. It's unusual to see the rarest skins having the highest sales volume. To summarize player engagement, the Genesis terminal is surprisingly strong here as well, with players still choosing to purchase and consume terminals with surprising frequency.
With player engagement surprisingly strong, let's understand how much revenue Valve might stand to make if they replaced all active duty cases with terminals instead.
Valve makes money in 3 ways, each represented by this chart. First is consumption revenue, which is the skins purchased directly from the terminals. Secondly, armory steering revenue is revenue that Valve generates by encouraging players to purchase armory passes because they can no longer get weapon cases dropped for free. Lastly, given terminals will no longer be affected by the loot box bans, Valve can stand to recover this revenue that would otherwise have been foregone. While this section of revenue is currently limited to France, the Netherlands, and Belgium, as more countries look to ban loot boxes, this share of revenue will only get larger. While I won't speak to each of the assumptions underlying these 3 revenue buckets,
in the description of this video below, you'll find a link to download this model completely free of charge. You'll be able to play around with assumptions that you think are most likely and see the subsequent impact on revenue. That will inform your own view of how likely you think Valve is to replace cases with terminals.
Based on the assumptions that I've used, Valve will see increases in revenue across consumption, armory steering, and lifted loot box ban revenue, which ultimately means that Genesis terminals could become a viable replacement for weapon cases. With Valve likely seeing an increase in revenue from Genesis terminals, it's likely looking like a success across all 3 of the criteria that we've outlined previously. Given how well terminals appear to be performing, it's likely that they're here to stay forever. To revisit our previous analysis covering why each of Valve's previous experiments have failed, we can add Genesis terminals to the list. While terminals have a slightly skewed distribution of rarities, this may be addressed by dynamic pricing changes in the future. Terminals appear to have a slightly lower consumption rate than cases, though it's possible that this will increase over time as the player base becomes used to terminals. Thirdly, in aggregate, Valve could see higher revenue from direct sales through terminals, and especially so if terminals replace all actively dropping cases, encouraging players to purchase cases from the armory.
It's clear that Valve has taken the learnings from their previous loot box replacement experiments and incorporated them into Genesis terminals. Given how relatively successful terminals have been at replacing the core mechanics that make cases so successful, I think they're here to stay permanently. Let's take what we've learned today and make some predictions about how the future might evolve. I'll categorize these predictions as high, medium, or low confidence.
Firstly, I think terminals will replace cases in the active drop pool, but at least for the short to medium term, cases will remain in the armory and possibly also remain available as part of the active drop pool. Once all active duty cases are replaced, casement investment ROIs will decrease because armory cases have higher prices and hence will generally have lower ROIs when they are discontinued. There might be more short-term investing opportunities as Valve looks to flush out all active duty cases and replace them with terminals instead. Case discontinuations have historically been the best time to purchase cases. With more of these opportunities available, there will be more ways for investors to invest. Future investing ROIs will likely decrease for the Genesis terminal when it's eventually discontinued, owing to its lack of special items and relatively low demand compared to cases. If, however, it has a very low price when it's discontinued, this low price may serve as a foundation for strong ROIs after its discontinuation. Lastly, given recent updates to allow knife trade-ups and the lack of special items with the current Genesis terminal, it seems likely Valve will introduce new knife sets for terminals moving forward. With low confidence, I'll predict that Valve will introduce a new set of finishes, moving away from the most recently introduced finishes being the Gamma finishes. Lastly, given the Genesis terminal seems to be an extension of existing experiments that Valve has run to move away from loot boxes, I predict that we'll see the Genesis terminal removed earlier than expected owing to its lack of special items. This may catch the community by surprise and push up investing ROIs.
Now that you understand why Valve has introduced terminals and what it might mean for the future, click here to view the next video on the knife trade-up update and the implications this presents for the CS2 economy.